Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's explainer. Today, we're going to explore something you've already done, I don't know, about a dozen times since you started listening, and that's breathing. But we aren't just going to talk about it on a surface level. We're actually going to map out the incredible, complex journey that a single breath takes, moving from the outside world all the way down into your microscopic cells. It is an absolute marvel of biological engineering, and honestly, I can't wait to share it with you. So, here is our structural roadmap for the explainer. We'll start with the mechanics of breathing, then measure your lung capacity, zoom way in for the great gas exchange, follow along with transporting life-saving gases, and then finish up with regulation and respiratory disorders. Section 1. The mechanics of breathing. Let's look at how we actually pull air in.
Now, before air can do anything useful for you, it has to travel down a highly specific anatomical pathway. It starts by entering the external nostrils, moves through the nasal passage into the pharynx, passes the larynx, your voice box, and heads straight down the trachea. From there, it enters this vast branching network of primary, secondary, and tertiary bronchi, followed by the bronchioles, until it finally reaches the finish line, the alveoli. This entire first half of the journey is what we call the conducting part, and its job is absolutely crucial. It acts like a biological HVAC system, humidifying the air and warming it up to your body temperature before it ever reaches those delicate respiratory alveoli. Now, what's really interesting about this is the underlying physics. It's all about the beautiful mechanical opposites of pressure and volume. That's what physically pulls air in and pushes it out. So, to breathe in, during inspiration, your diaphragm contracts and flattens out, and your ribs lift up. This expands the overall volume of your thoracic chamber. And as any physics fan knows, when volume goes up, pressure goes down. This drops the pressure inside your lungs below the atmospheric pressure outside, creating a vacuum that literally pulls air into your body. Expiration? Well, that's just the exact reverse. The diaphragm relaxes, the thoracic volume shrinks back down, pulmonary pressure rises, and the air gets pushed right back out.
And you do this incredibly coordinated mechanical dance about 12 to 16 times every single minute. That's the normal respiratory rate for a healthy human. And if a doctor ever needs to measure that rate, they use a highly specific clinical instrument called a spirometer.
Which brings us to Section 2, measuring your lung capacity and exploring respiratory volumes.
So, there are 4 baseline respiratory volumes we need to talk about. First is your tidal volume. This is just the volume of a normal, relaxed breath, which is only about 500 milliliters. But your lungs can do so much more than that. If you take a massive, forceful breath in, you're tapping into your inspiratory reserve volume, pulling in an extra 2,500 to 3,000 milliliters. Conversely, if you force all your air out, that's your expiratory reserve volume, about 1,000 to 1,100 milliliters. And here's a cool fact. No matter how hard you exhale, you can never empty your lungs completely. You always retain a residual volume of about 1,100 to 1,200 milliliters to keep the whole system from collapsing. So yeah, normal breathing only uses that tiny 500 milliliter fraction at the very top. Now, by adding those baseline volumes together, medical professionals calculate your total respiratory capacities. For example, your vital capacity, which is the absolute maximum volume of air you can breathe in after a forced expiration, is a combination of your expiratory reserve, your tidal volume, and your inspiratory reserve. Add in that residual volume that never leaves, and you get an incredible total lung capacity of 5,000 to 6,000 milliliters. That's up to 6 liters of air, which gives us a fantastic big picture of what the human lung is truly capable of holding. But here is a really fascinating biological quirk. Out of the 500 milliliters you take in during a normal breath, about 150 milliliters never actually reaches the finish line. This air fills those conducting pathways we mentioned earlier, from your nostrils down to the terminal bronchi, but is completely excluded from the actual gaseous exchange. It's basically stuck in an anatomical waiting room where nothing happens. In the medical world, this is quite aptly named your dead space. Moving on to Section 3, the great gas exchange, from the alveoli to the blood.
So the crucial point here is that this entire life-giving exchange relies completely on a passive process called simple diffusion. Your body doesn't actively pump these gases back and forth. Instead, it relies on 4 strict physical properties: the pressure or concentration gradient, the physical thickness of the membranes, the total surface area of the lungs, and the solubility of the gases themselves. And speaking of solubility, carbon dioxide is actually 20 to 25 times more soluble than oxygen. This profoundly changes how easily it crosses these tissues compared to oxygen.
To really understand how the pressure gradient drives this diffusion, we have to look at partial pressures, which are measured in millimeters of mercury. Think of this as your cheat sheet to human survival. Look at oxygen, or PO2. In the alveoli, it's sitting nice and high at 104, while the deoxygenated blood arriving at the lungs is only at 40. That massive 64-point difference literally forces oxygen into the blood. On the flip side, the PCO2 in that same deoxygenated blood is 45, which is higher than the 40 inside the alveoli. So carbon dioxide is naturally pushed out of the blood and into the lungs so you can exhale it. It's a flawless, passive exchange driven entirely by pressure differences.
And what facilitates this perfect exchange is the alveolar diffusion membrane. This structure is an absolute marvel of natural engineering. It's massive in its total surface area, yet it is astonishingly thin. We're talking a mere 0.5 millimeters thick in total. But despite that microscopic thinness, it still consists of 3 distinct layers: the thin squamous epithelium of the alveoli, the endothelium of the alveolar capillaries, and a basement substance sandwiched right in between them. This extreme thinness is exactly what enables gas exchange to happen as fast as you can breathe. Section 4. Transporting life-saving gases: oxygen and carbon dioxide. When it comes to oxygen transport, your body almost entirely relies on a dedicated transport vehicle. A staggering 97% of the oxygen in your blood binds reversibly with hemoglobin inside your red blood cells, forming a complex called oxyhemoglobin. Since each hemoglobin molecule has 4 heme units, one single hemoglobin molecule can carry 4 oxygen molecules at a time. Only a tiny 3% of your oxygen travels dissolved in the blood plasma itself. But hemoglobin is smart. It doesn't just grab oxygen blindly. It knows exactly when to let it go based purely on the local environmental conditions. Up in the lungs, you have high oxygen pressure, low carbon dioxide, a lower hydrogen ion concentration, and a slightly lower temperature. This specific chemical cocktail forces hemoglobin to bind tightly to oxygen. But down in your hard-working muscle tissues, the environment is the exact opposite. You've got low oxygen, high carbon dioxide, more hydrogen ions, and a higher temperature. This causes the oxyhemoglobin to dissociate, dropping off the oxygen right where it's needed most. Under normal physiological conditions, every 100 milliliters of oxygenated blood successfully delivers about 5 milliliters of oxygen to your tissues, following a very specific mathematical sigmoid curve. Carbon dioxide, on the other hand, is handled very differently. While about 20 to 25% hitches a ride on hemoglobin, forming carbaminohemoglobin, and 7% travels dissolved as carbonic acid, a massive 70% is transported as bicarbonate. This is made possible by a specialized enzyme in your red blood cells and plasma called carbonic anhydrase. It facilitates a rapid reaction turning CO2 into bicarbonate at the tissue site and then just reverses the whole process back at the lungs so you can exhale the waste. And finally, Section 5, Regulation and Respiratory Disorders, Brain Control and Diseases. Your brain relies on 3 primary respiratory centers to run this whole operation on autopilot. First is the rhythm center, located in the medulla oblongata. This is your pacemaker. It regulates your baseline normal, inspiration, and expiration. Next up is the pneumotaxic center in the pons. Think of this one as the moderator. It can send neural signals to reduce the duration of inspiration, actively altering your respiratory rate where needed. Finally, situated right next to the rhythm center is the chemosensitive area, which constantly monitors your blood chemistry to signal for rhythm adjustments. And this brilliantly illustrates one of the most counterintuitive, mind-blowing facts in all of human biology. We always think of breathing as our way of getting oxygen, right? But the chemosensitive area in your brain is actually detecting increases in carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions. It doesn't really monitor oxygen. Receptors in your aortic arch and carotid artery are doing the exact same thing. The role of oxygen in regulating your actual respiratory rhythm is surprisingly insignificant. Your body increases your breathing rate to blow off excess carbon dioxide, not to hunt for more oxygen. It's wild. But of course, this delicate system is vulnerable. And when this biology breaks down, it leads to serious realities for many people. There are several common respiratory disorders that can disrupt this automatic rhythm. Asthma, for example, makes breathing incredibly difficult and causes wheezing, simply because the bronchi and bronchioles become chronically inflamed. Then there are occupational respiratory disorders, like silicosis or asbestosis. These occur when people suffer long-term exposure to harmful dust and fumes, leading to fibrosis and severe, lasting lung damage. And finally, we have to talk about emphysema. Emphysema serves as a stark reminder of just how fragile that 0.5 millimeter diffusion membrane really is.
This is a chronic disorder where the walls of the alveoli become permanently damaged. When those walls break down, it massively decreases the overall respiratory surface area. And if you shrink the surface area, well, you drastically reduce the gas exchange we've been discussing, effectively starving the body of oxygen. The major, most common cause of this devastating permanent damage is cigarette smoking. So think about what we've covered today. From the changing physical pressures in your thoracic cavity to the complex chemical reactions happening at the microscopic membrane level, you perform this incredible, perfectly balanced automatic rhythm 12 to 16 times a minute without even trying. It really makes you wonder, what other incredibly complex, life-saving systems is your body secretly managing right now while you just go about your day? Thank you so much for joining me to explore the journey of a breath on today's Explainer and keep that curiosity alive.